Story 1. I used to work for a very unpleasant manager when I worked at McDonald's. This person was horrible to us. He was constantly bullying us, speaking negatively about us to customers, and doing everything in his power to make us miserable. Well, so many people complained about him that he ended up getting fired. The new manager was great. He was super chill and understanding with all of us. A couple of weeks after he took over, the old difficult person comes in and starts talking about how terrible the store looks, how our service is worse than ever, and how much the store needs him. The new manager looked at him and said, "If you don't leave, then the police are going to make you." When the difficult person didn't move, the new awesome manager stuck to his decision and called the police. The difficult person is no longer allowed on any McDonald's property in the city and has a restraining order against him. Story 2. The first time I had dinner at my parents' house after I got my own apartment, my dad was giving me grief as usual. Finally, I stood up and said, "I don't live here anymore. I don't have to put up with you this way any longer. I'm going home," and walked out. Most liberating moment of my life. Story 3. Well, this might be a long one. I grew up around a mother with dissociative disorder as well as narcissism. She was addicted to opiates as far back as I can remember and would do anything to get them, and I mean anything. Growing up, it wasn't rare for her to have a tantrum during one of her highs and beat me, break me down by picking apart every little thing she knew I was afraid or self-conscious of, and actively sabotage my relationship with my father and siblings. She would be up for days at a time, pass out standing up with her eyes glassed over and back hunched, and when she awoke, once again start moving and otherwise destroying everything in the house. There were times when I'd leave and the house would be clean, and come home and it would look as though a tornado had run through it. Broken glass, animal feces, dirty clothes, roaches, empty pill bottles, ground-up pill residue, and other miscellaneous things littering the house. On particularly bad nights, she would hallucinate, and during those times it wouldn't be uncommon to find pools of her blood on the ground from running through glass. I remember being up for days at a time because she and my father would scream at each other for days without stopping, actively trying to get me to pick one side or the other, even if it meant barging into my room at 4 a.m. to begin their screaming match where I could watch. She manipulated me, abandoned me at times in the middle of nowhere when she'd meet up with her various sugar daddies. She was still with my dad during this, and never once apologized during her brief moments of mental clarity. If anything, she would blame everything but herself. In her mind, she was infallible. Money was always a big issue since she couldn't work in such a state. She sold some of her pills, yes, but ultimately those funds were used to buy more drugs anyway. Because of this, we were homeless frequently, without power and water for literally years at a time, and barely ever had any food. It was almost every night I went to sleep with the only thing I'd have eaten that day being a school lunch. On weekends, sometimes I didn't eat at all. The rest of my family had no clue this was happening. During the summer when I was 16, my aunt, whom I hadn't talked much with since I was a lot younger, got in touch. She asked if I'd like to come to stay with them in Texas for a few weeks during the summer. Of course, I said yes, and I was absolutely ecstatic. I didn't bother asking my parents since I'd be very much surprised if they even noticed I was gone. So they were unaware. My aunt drove up all the way to Iowa and stayed the afternoon with us. My parents seemed to lack the cognition to recognize she was even there out of the blue, so they didn't come out of their room. As I stated before, this happened frequently. When she arrived, our house was fairly clean. We left for a bit to go get food, and when we returned, the chaos had already returned. As she told me when we were on our way to Texas, the thing that bothered her the most wasn't that our house had suddenly gone to hell, it was that I didn't even react to it. Instead, I tiptoed around the debris and started packing my things without a word. This deeply unsettled her, and ultimately she asked me if I was safe where I lived. I said yes, as it was all I had ever known. She told me that what she saw frightened her and she wanted me to come live with her in Texas. Thinking that she was joking, I brushed it off. After a few days down there, though, I knew I had to do it. They showed me love, compassion, and care that I'd never even known existed prior to this, and it shook me to my core. So we decided I was going to get emancipated from my parents and move in with them. Ultimately, this involved sitting in a courthouse across from my parents and their lawyer. The judge asked why I wanted to leave, and I explained the above. I expressed the love and compassion I'd experienced for the first time in my life and that I wanted to, for once, live in peace. Their lawyer argued, "To me, it seems as though you have no respect for your parents. Is it because of their financial situation? It looks as though you're attached to the perks of living in a family that makes a reasonable amount of money, and not that you want to leave because they're unfit parents." My mother and father joined in, trying to break me down as they have so many times before. I let him speak, I let them speak, and I held my tongue until it was my turn. They tried to goad me on, tried to break me as they had so many times before, but I wouldn't let them. Finally, the judge asked me to speak. With as level a stare as I could muster, I looked at my mother, my father, and their lawyer across from me and said, "If you're asking me if I have no respect for my parents, then you are correct. However, to say it's simply financially motivated is incorrect. I no longer have respect for them because they have." As I was nearly finished, my mother, as she had so many times in the past, began to squirm and scream at me from across the table. "He's lying. The little bastard is just," until the judge slammed his gavel down and silenced the room. My mother staring up at him in complete and utter disbelief. I looked at her, keeping the tears I knew were right behind the corner at bay, and said, "For once in your life, for once in my life, behave as an adult. You can't stop me by simply yelling over me anymore. You have nothing to hold over me now. You can do nothing." As I spoke, the judge motioned to his officer, who moved towards my mother. Her expression still frozen in complete bewilderment as the officer aggressively told her to get up out of her chair and escorted her out of the room. The judge looked at me, my aunt, my father, and his lawyer with one sweeping glance and then spoke. "I am sorry that you have had to deal with this for so long, young man. There's nothing more that you or anyone else needs to say. You deserve to live a normal life as a normal kid, and it's obvious to me now that your parents are unfit to provide that kind of environment. You will go back to Texas with your aunt, and we will regularly have our social workers in touch to check in on how you are doing. Make the most of the second chance. Good luck, young man." Adjourned. Though the bang of his gavel was the only noise that permeated the room, all I could hear was the ringing in my ears. My father and his lawyer were escorted out of the room, and the tears I had held back all this time came gushing out like a tidal wave. It's been 7 years since that day, and I am happy to say that I've managed to grow up and become a well-adjusted adult. I have a great career, great friends, and an amazing girlfriend. I've been in therapy ever since we got back to Texas, and I no longer have trouble sleeping or terrible bouts of anxiety and depression as I used to. Life is good. In summary, mother is a narcissist with dissociative personality disorder addicted to opiates. Father kind of just went along and didn't really do much. Aunt came down to take me to Texas, saw how bad everything was, and asked me if I wanted to live with them. After some time I said yes, went to court against my parents under the pretense of emancipation, and got to confront them and outline all the trauma, pain, and fear they've caused me. My mother was escorted out of the room when she tried to interrupt me, and the judge sided with us, and I was emancipated. Now I'm doing really well. Story 4. I told my ex I was getting remarried. He told me he was going to stop me and put a lien on my house, which I bought with my money 6 years after the divorce. My son would come home from visitations telling me how his dad was going to stop the wedding and I'd have to pay him all of this money. Get to court. His attorney goes on for what felt like forever. My lawyer, yes, I had to get one, stands up and simply hands the judge the divorce papers showing the disbursement of funds and how my ex isn't owed anything. The judge looks at ex's lawyer and basically asks, "Did you even ask for this document before filing?" and dismisses the case. Story 5. A while back, I got a job as a popcorn attendant in the local cinema as a temporary thing while I figured out what I was doing with my life. There was a supervisor who had worked there since the site opened, around 5 years, who was very difficult and had numerous complaints about her from countless staff. In the first week, I nearly quit because of her attitude. As an example, one night I was on a close and basically cleaned the entirety of the front of house on my own. I stopped to take a drink of water, and she marched up to me saying, "We don't pay you to stand around drinking, you know?" To which I calmly responded that I was thirsty and needed a drink of water, And if she wanted to tell me I wasn't allowed to have a glass of water, then good luck. But I was pretty sure health and safety would have something to say about that. She complained about not having had a break all day, which I ignored because it was not my problem, but internally I was annoyed about it because it was pointless to be so difficult about things. About 2 weeks in, I got promoted to supervisor as I was clearly extremely competent by their usual standards, but she also got promoted to floor manager, so she continued her power trips and tried to lord it over me and everyone else. For weeks after that, I got another promotion to floor manager, and at this point we were equals, so she couldn't boss me around anymore. Instead, she tried a different tack, which was to try and lord it over me with her superior knowledge of processes and where to find stuff, etc. My response was to say, "Oh, thanks. That's so helpful. I mean, you know how things work so much better than me because you've been here 5 years, and I've only been here 6 weeks." She had a face like she was upset. It was delightful. Story 6. My ex and I were moving out after a breakup, cleaning out the garage. She was being critical of my post-breakup plan of moving in with a coworker until I could find a better place to live, as most options were not great. I took a deep breath and laughed. This puzzled her. "Why are you laughing?" she asked. I collected myself and said, "Because this is the last time I have to listen to this. You do not get to be critical of anything I ever do, ever again." It was a really great feeling because I literally thought of the phrase, "You have no power here," as I laughed. Story 7. A pair of angry mothers threatened legal action if I fired their useless children. I work for a trampoline park franchise. We opened a sister location that I ran for about a year and a half before moving back to take over the old location. When I got back, a lot needed fixing, but in particular, there were 2 teenage employees who had been fired or suspended on numerous occasions. They were generally lazy, rude individuals who should not have been hired in the first place. The problem was, they both had aggressive, overprotective mothers who intimidated the manager into rescinding any punishments. Once I came back, I took stock of our employees and had a long talk with the entire leadership team. I learned which employees caused which problems, who was unreliable, who had a regular habit of skipping shifts, texting on shift, etc. I fired about half a dozen that first week, including the 2 I mentioned. That night, both mothers called my personal cell to yell at me. Our numbers are listed in the online scheduling tool, so employees can find shift covers more easily. They demanded to know why I fired them, threatened to sue, have me arrested, accused me of discrimination against their white middle-class sons, etc. I simply asked, "Is your son over 18? Yes. So you are demanding I illegally release personal information regarding a former adult employee? Goodbye." Story 8. Not me, but a story my dad used to tell me all the time. So my biological grandmother was very emotionally abusive. She was very controlling and tried to keep people within her sphere of influence. There's a reason why my grandfather divorced her. In high school, my dad had a job washing airplanes at an airport in our area, which he absolutely loved because he was a huge fan of aircraft in general. He had classes until roughly 10 in the morning, and then he'd be off to work until around 10 at night. It was what he loved, so he didn't mind long hours being around aircraft all day. But one day, he came home a little too late for his mom's liking. She said she'd take his keys to his motorcycle and that he'd lost privileges to it. The fact of the matter is that he bought the motorcycle himself, and he needed it to get to school as well as work. He laughed in her face, and she didn't do anything. She couldn't do anything. Story 9. I'm a high school teacher who teaches a lot of senior grades and deals with graduation grades and university references, among other responsibilities. In June, after final marks were given to students but not formally reported, a parent of a graduating student visited my classroom. He was a dental surgeon in town who ran a large operation and donated generously to local sports, a big figure in a small town. I had given his child a mark in the high B range. He came to my office, insisting, "There must be some mistake," which quickly escalated to, "You're going to change it because I tell you to," and "How much will it cost to get him an A?" When I refused the bribe, his response was, "You're fired." Not, "I'm going to get you fired," but, "You're fired. Clean out your desk." I simply asked him to leave. The situation ended badly. He threatened violence, so I reported him to the school administration, and he's now banned from the property. The man, who claimed, "I pay your salary, so you work for me, you lousy piece of trash," was threatened with police action by Mr. Random Act Public Group.